Bonjour and Benny-vous. Thank you for joining me for the special October edition of the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast, episode number 40. Covering the Dueling Oaks, Suicide Oaks, and the haunting Mona Lisa Drive, all in City Park, New Orleans. If you are local, you are no doubt not familiar with the park's sprawling over 1,300 acres of pure lush forest and historic oaks, some of the oldest in the country. Visitors alike may know the park for the New Orleans Museum of Art, the Sculpture Garden, as well as new additions to the park being worked on throughout the years. Café du Monde, of course, and the many tales that go with City Park's long, rich history. Its roots deep and as old as the oaks themselves. Join me as we investigate these haunting tales and historical facts of one of New Orleans' most beloved treasures. Sit back and dwell in the darkness, mon ami, and thank you for joining me at the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast. When talking about haunted areas in City Park, among its many oak trees that have been living with us for over hundreds of years, the suicide oak is one of City Park's most famous trees. It is located on Victory Avenue near the old swimming pool. This was once the area of despair, where legend tells us that the depressed went to end it all. Today, the suicide oak stands with great dignity, but severely injured. It lost two very large and old limbs, one in 1986, another in 1988. Needed tree surgery was performed. From the beginning, the live oak forest of City Park has been part of the heritage of New Orleanians. These beautiful old trees have stood as silent sentinels as the City Park developed into the urban oasis it is today. City Park will continue to provide the care needed so that generations to come enjoy the most significant collection of mature live oaks. Stories abroad include the suicide oaks of seeing the many tragic lives who have passed, their ghosts still roaming the park to this day on Victory Avenue. One of my favorite areas in City Park is the Café du Monde area, a restaurant which has the wonderful beignets, red beans and rice, other delectable entrees including adult beverages, café au laits, and many coffee drinks and sodas, as well as desserts. It used to be early the morning call, which served beignets and coffees as well. Just up over the bridge, and on your way to the Sculpture Garden and the New Orleans Museum of Art, we will pass the Dueling Oaks, another infamous oak located in City Park. The park is nearly 1,300 acres, and there's plenty of spirits to escape. Make sure you visit the Dueling Oaks. When people met in the old time of duels, many say you can hear the spirits and ghosts near those trees, that they have been afraid of touring there. But the Dueling Oaks aren't the only ghosts you can hear. Back in old New Orleans, the Dueling Oaks would see many duels over many things of money, property, women, stature. Listen closely and keep your eyes peeled for the ghost above to join you on their picnic. The history of the Dueling Oaks. In early Creole days, more duels were fought in New Orleans than any other American city. Creole honor was a thing of intricate delicacy. To be offended by a word or glance, the Dueling Oaks were a favorite settling for these affairs. They with pistol, sabre, or collenciade, a long sword with a broad forte and very slender foible, a favored dueling weapon since the 17th century. Creoles were expert swordsmen and often delighted in any and every opportunity to exhibit their art. Duels were fought over real and trivial insults, were sometimes deliberately provoked by young men, anxious to display their skill. A quarrel between rival lovers, a fancied slight, a political argument, a difference of opinion regarding an opera, any one of these things were ample excuse for a duel under the oaks in the history of Louisiana. Alcée Fortier states that on the day of Sunday, 1839, 10 duels were fought here. Many of the most prominent figures in New Orleans of the era took part in the duels in City Park. Bernard Mandeville de Marigny, famous in the city's history, said to have fought 19 duels beneath the oaks. Michel Green Louet, secretary to Governor Claiborne, was killed here in a duel in 1804. Residents of the neighborhood grew accustomed to watching the daily processions to the oaks and seeing them depart, often one man being carried away, perhaps to his family for burial. Of course, duels did not always terminate in fatality. Often injured, dignity was appeased by the first blood drawn, and the duelists sometimes left the park arm in arm. Many of the contests ending at the dueling oaks began in ballrooms. A popular lady might be asked for half a dance belonging to another gentleman. No argument would ensue on the refusal of the first gentleman to relinquish his partner. But the next morning, the thwarted gallant would see that the other received a challenge to a meeting in the oaks. The whole affair was conducted with exquisite politeness. By evening, one or the other of the gentlemen might have performed his last courtly bow in this world. Benjamin Christie de Lison and a certain M. Morel dueled to the death for less reason than that. De Lison at supper moved his sister's chair a bit too close to the chair of the young lady Morel was escorting. Immediately, Morel called upon de Lison to step out in the balcony, where he slapped him in the face with a glove. 2 days later, they met in City Park, and de Lison was killed. Bernard de Marigny escorted Anna Mathilda Morales, whom he later married, to a ball, excluded all other admirers, and Thérocoubon was the recipient of several challenges. The dashing de Marigny met them all, one by one they fell under the expert swordsmanship. Famous in the early 1800s was Émile Lasserre, one-time U.S. congressman from New Orleans. Lasserre fought 18 duels during his life. A small man, scarcely above the height of a 14-year-old boy. His impulsive and fiery temper kept him almost constantly embroiled in trouble of one sort or another. Kind-hearted and generous in his less intense moments, Lasserre's anger was always left on the dueling grounds. He would carefully bandage the very wounds he inflicted and sit up all night beside the bed of the man he had just put there. There is a legend of a European scientist who had to fight a duel because he insulted the Mississippi River in the presence of a Creole. The scientist sneered at the Mississippi, saying it was but a tiny rill compared to the great rivers of Europe. For this, the European received a slashed cheek from the Creole sword. John T. Monroe, in his New Orleans, the Crescent City book, listed among the noted duelists meeting in City Park Marcel Dauphin, who fled from France to America during the Red Terror. His exit from the world was hastened by a rival fencing master, Bonneval, personal friend of the sea-green incurable Robespierre. There were, of course, many fencing masters in New Orleans, and these men fought each other for gratification of their professional jealousy, sometimes to entice clients by a display of skill. Senor Don Jose Loluya, better known as Pepe Luya, was perhaps the best known of them all, and if all the tales and legends are true, Pepe broke all records for the participation in duels. Stories of his killings are so numerous, it is more than likely that most of them are myths. Yet he maintained his own cemetery, now St. Vincent de Paul's. For for said popular rumor, the burial of his victims. Laloux's duels, for the most part, however, were visually and unusually terminated at his own suggestion, and before a fatality occurred, his dexterity was sufficient to render his opponents helpless. With Pepe's sword lightly pressed against his throat, almost at the outset of the encounter, Pepe mastered not only foils but almost every weapon. He was the South's greatest expert in the use of the saber, equally skilled with the broadsword, and practically invulnerable when arrived and armed with a rapier or small sword. His skill with firearms was no less remarkable. Pepe's friends thought little of the holding of a silver dollar between their fingers or a pipe in their teeth as a target for the Spaniard. He would balance an egg on the head of a small sun and crack the shell with a ball of 30 paces. With a rifle he would hit any coin or cork tossed into the air. He was reputed to have been a genius with a bowie knife. None of Laloux's serious duels instead lasted a few minutes as he was short work of disarming his antagonist. Duels were sometimes fought with bowie knives, even with stranger weapons. The duels recorded during which the opponents fought with pistols, each holding a corner of the same handkerchief, in which case they would not have been more than a few feet apart. Men dueled with poison pills, a drawing being held in order to determine which would be obliged to take the pills. There were several memorable duels with shotguns under the oaks, and one in which M. de Bois fought M. Alpini de Bois. Life was saved by a $20 gold piece in his waistcoat pocket, the bullet being deflected when it struck the coin. Later, the same de Bois fought M. Alistine Guitar in City Park and received 14 wounds from Gerald Collinchemont. De Bois is known to engage in 24 duels. The dueling oaks in City Park have been some of the most colorful scenes in New Orleans history. For years, swords clanged against sword, and bullets streaked between the ancient trees. In articles in the Times Democrat, March 13, 1892, said, "Blood has been shed under the old cathedral aisles of nature." Between 1834 and 1844, scarcely a day passed without duels being fought in the oaks. Why, it would not be strange if the very violets blossomed red of his oaked grass. The lover of his mistress, the gentleman for his honor, the courier for his king, what loyalty has not cried out in pistol shot and scratched of steel? Sometimes 200 or 300 people hurried from the city to witness these human battlings. On the occasion of one duel, the spectators could not stand no more, drew their swords, and there was a general melee. In 1855, the police began to enforce the laws against dueling, but it continued serendipitously for many years, despite frequent arrests and prosecutions. Finally, however, the law began to have some effect, and there seems to have arisen a simultaneously challenge to defend his honor. At this last time when the man could challenge to defend his honor with the awkward sword or pistol, loss of interest in affairs, suffered no stigma by refusing the invitation to the Oaks. By 1890, dueling was only history. John McDonough, philanthropist and benefactor for public education, bestowed the original 100-acre tract of land that is known as City Park. It is one of the largest stands of nature and mature live oaks in the world. More than 250 of these magnificent trees are listed on the National Registry, one of the most exciting modern-day spectacles in celebration in the Oaks. In celebration of the holiday season, nearly 1 million lights adorn the ancient oaks. Only one of the legendary dueling oaks remains standing in the dueling ground today. The other have succumbed to inevitable forces of nature in the 1940s. Nearby stands the famous Suicide Oaks, where many disconsolate lovers and bankrupts have conceived their own demise and concocted their own demise. All are located not far from the New Orleans Museum of Art, built through a bequest of Isaac Delgado and housing his extensive collection of objects of art. Objet d'art, its domain influence has historically seen French and other New Orleans dueling site with St. Anthony's Garden, located behind the St. Louis Cathedral. For more information on the duels of St. Louis Cathedral and the St. Anthony Garden, please check out the previous episode, 39, the St. Louis Cathedral. When you think of Mona Lisa, hopefully Leonardo da Vinci's famous painting of a smiling woman leaps to mind. Not the terrifying image of a ghostly young woman emerging from the dark to claw at your car window. At least I hope that's the case. Perhaps you are one of the people over the years have visited the ghost of Mona Lisa while parking at night on Mona Lisa Drive in New Orleans City Park. The legend goes that Mona Lisa was the daughter of the wealthy family that lived in the McFadden Mansion, a stately building near the big lake that is now home to the Christian Brothers School. Never mind that Texas oil millionaire, William H. McFadden, and his wife Helen, who bought and expanded the original building to what it is today, never actually had children. Mona Lisa was said to have fallen in love with a sailor, and the pair would make eyes at one another whilst promenading beneath the oaks and beside the lagoons near the family's home. However, her father disapproved of his precious daughter falling under the spell of this and forbade her from seeing him. Distraught, Mona Lisa drove into a nearby lagoon and drowned herself in Shakespearean fashion. Or perhaps Mona Lisa was murdered. That is another version of the tale is indeed. Mona Lisa ended up drowning in one of City Park's lagoons. Whether by suicide or homicide depends on the story being told. In the other telling, the sailor is a scoundrel who was cruelly using Mona Lisa for a fling while ashore and had no interest in a long-term marriage. The pair got into a heated argument and led to a physical altercation, which ended with the sailor drowning poor Mona Lisa in the lagoon. The legend goes to say that the distraught dad then donated his holdings to the city for a park, with the condition that a statue of Venus, which was said to resemble the unfortunate daughter, be erected in her memory. Other less likely accounts say a philanthropist donated several statues to the New Orleans Parkway Commission, with the caveat that this particular statue be given good display, as it was in memory of his deceased daughter, Mona. Photos from the 1930s show a statue in City Park that may be a Mona Lisa displayed at the center of an intersection of bricked pathways, framed by nearly trimmed hedges with a nearby fountain. Drawn by a romantically tragic tale of Mona Lisa, couples would flock to the statue. Sadly, all this attention reportedly ended when Venus was knocked down and destroyed by a speeding car. The remains of the statue are alleged to be in storage at the New Orleans Museum of Art. The site itself grew wild, with only the pedestal of the statue still visible for many years until now removed, while the next exact location where the statue stood is supposedly a mystery. It is said to be just the southwest of the Poppy Seed Fountain. Poppy Fountain was a popular gathering spot for witches in the 1970s. But this is a ghost story. A map of the New Orleans City Park website shows the location of Mona Lisa Drive, where the ghost originally was seen before she branched out to the other parts of the park. The spirit of Mona Lisa reportedly did not take kindly to her statue being destroyed. Couples parking on Mona Lisa Drive, the secluded road that runs north of the traffic circle on Harrison Avenue, past the Coterie Forest, began to report a misty apparition that would loudly moan and tap at the car window. This was especially scary to couples because it was a well-known fact that the canoodling teens always get killed first in horror movies. The sightings of the misty specter of Mona Lisa increased over the years. The mournful apparition was also known as Mona Lisa, or Mona Lisa, screaming, yelling, and strange laughter to be heard by people passing the woods or playing at the tennis complex as the heartbroken Mona Lisa cried out in the night, either because she was ignored for her beloved sailor and long loved for him, or was eternally furious about being murdered by him. So ubiquitous have the ghost tales become that Mona Lisa Drive is listed by several websites as one of the most haunted roads in America. As the stories of her nocturnal appearances became more widespread, so did Mona Lisa's rage. She has now been spotted all over City Park, not just on Mona Lisa Drive. Her vaporous tragic form floating beneath the ancient oaks and down the secluded paths of darkened nights. Thank you so much for joining me again on another episode of the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast. Your support in watching my videos and sharing and liking and subscribing to the channel is greatly, greatly appreciated. And now that it is October, I'd like to wish you a happy October and Halloween season. Sources for this episode come from Campanella Catherine, New Orleans City Park, Arcadia Publishing, Coop Austin Drive, down 5 America's Most Haunted Roads, New Orleans City Park website, verylocal.com. neworleans.com, visit neworleans.com, duelingoaks.com, and the neworleanshistorical.org, as well as nolahistoryguy.com, in gathering information and research for this episode. Bonne nuit, mon ami, and thank you again for joining me. Please leave a comment down below and let me know what you would like to hear covered on another episode of the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast. Or also give a comment of what your favorite ghost stories are for this Halloween season. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan Mckern. And until we meet again, au revoir.